I just saw someone on Threads say that progressive Christianity and Christian nationalism are the same because they both desire implementing biblical or scriptural or Christian principles to govern society. And this is like wildly and sillily inaccurate for lots of reasons. So Christian nationalism is not merely the desire to implement biblical principles for the governing of society. Christian nationalism has a bigger definition than that, particularly that it has strict boundaries around national identity, civic participation, social belonging that fall along ethno-racial lines, namely white, usually men, and will define who counts as an American or who counts as a Christian based off of those ethno-racial lines or who's willing to assimilate to them. Christian nationalism is also very authoritarian in that you got a wild, chaotic world. You need strong leaders to implement strong policy to deal with that chaotic world, and that means authoritarianism. You're not going to find like pacifistic or Anabaptist Christian nationalism. I mean, it exists, but like it's going to be militaristic. Usually it's going to be implement some amount of like police violence as a necessity to implement biblical principles in society. Whereas like you've got the modern sort of post deconstruction or post-evangelical or progressive Christian movements that also want to see biblical principles implemented in society. But these are hearkening back to the much older liberal, progressive, social, public gospel and theology that has been around in America for hundreds of years. And it is pluralistic in that it does not demand or need white male Christians to be in charge to implement a good society, a society that works for everyone's well-being. Progressive Christians or the liberal social gospel movement has long wanted to work for the common good, but did not always define that around those ethno-racial lines or around sort of misogynistic or patriarchal ways of doing leadership. And it wasn't authoritarian. It did not need strongmen to implement its policies. It wanted to be more pluralistically, democratically, consensus-based styles of leadership. And then the other claim is that because progressives and conservatives both have this sort of virulence, this intensity to their desires, that they're the same. But again, intensity is not a measure of rightness or wrongness. And if you come across racism or misogyny or ways of implementing state policy that is brutalistic, that should be met with intense opposition. Then that's not to be confused with you're just being a fundamentalist about your desire for everyone to live in a just society. I guess if that's your definition of fundamentalist, yes, I really want that. I intensely want that. And that is not the same as conservative fundamentalism that has that certain virulence and violence and willingness to use of violence and brutality to implement its strict ethno-racial success for a certain kind of person. All that to say, these are not the same.